go, Jennifer. We can casual. Say for me.
All right. What metrics would show that the problem was effectively addressed? After 3 agile iterations showed a trend of increasingly prolonged test work, the test performed an intensive backlog refinement. I apologize. I'm getting over being sick.
No, it's all right.
Okay. So again, what metrics would show that the problem was effectively addressed? So
what's the problem right now? Like, let's talk through the problem. We'll break it down together. It's no big deal.
Okay. So the issue that we're seeing is that the test work is taking longer than it should, is how I'm interpreting that.
Yeah, that's good. See you later, Carlos. Trend of increasing prolonged test. So it's like, man, this is getting worse. Like, we're having lots of we got to go in and test a bunch of junk and figure it out. That's cool. And then what they did, Jen, was they went through and they said, hey, we went through, hey, we're going to fix this thing. Intensive backlog refinement. So in your mind, like when they say, oh, we went and refined the backlog, what did they actually do? Like, what kind of things mean backlog refinement? Any idea?
So I would say probably go through each of those stories.
Yes, ma'am. Do what about them?
Ensure that they're timed appropriately to fit in each of the sprints effectively, so that they can be worked.
Okay, so like timed appropriately, you mean like not too big, not too small. They're like kind of like Goldilocks in them, like breaking some of them down. So they're like, oh, that's way too big, bro. Like, we got to break this down into a couple chunks. So I love that. I didn't want to make the screen all nasty. And so they're like breaking them down. Break them down, all of them, or like a portion of them? What do you think? If we had all these stories, which one should we focus on breaking down the most?
I'm not entirely sure how to answer that.
Oh, come on. Everybody says it. No big deal. So like, what is the order? What is the general order of the stories on there? It's just like whoever threw an idea in first, like whoever's the highest ranking, but the idea, like what should be the rank of the things on this list?
I mean, I would say stuff that makes the most sense and needs to be done before other things can be accomplished.
Yeah, like whatever needs to be done like early, and that's a smiley face, or whatever is like the coolest and best and most impactful. I'm like terrible drawer. Yeah, so we're ranking it based on value or necessity, like there. So, and the stuff at the bottom is like, hey, we'll get to it sometime. Like, maybe. And so if we were going to focus our attention, should we look at all of them and be like, let's go down these 227 items that we could do and break them all down with the same detail? Or should we focus our attention to break them down on a certain portion of the list? What do you think?
I would go by a portion, highest priority.
Yeah, you go to the top, right? And you would like say like, hey, we're going to cover a certain amount of the top. We're going to break a certain amount of these down, and just so we can stay a little bit ahead of the game. And we're going to break them down. So we're going to break them down. We might want to like reprioritize. Like some of them, as we're starting to look, we'll be like, oh man, how did this one get up here? No. Now we know that. And then like, oh, this one? Like, dude, times have changed and now that one goes up here. So we might reprioritize. We're going to break them down. Anything else we might do? We might kill some stuff, maybe. Those are the big ones. All right, so if we did that, we refined it. And then by doing that, it helped lower the test work. It's weird. Let's go to the answers. You're doing great. I know you're new. It's no big deal.
So increase in value per story. I would say keep that, especially if we're going off of prioritization and what the customer is looking at. That's going to give them the most value.
Understood.
Speed of impediment resolution. I don't necessarily think speed is a determining factor. It's more or less the quality that you're putting out.
Okay.
That's going to reduce your test work. So I would
Yeah.
nix that one.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Stories completed per iteration. I do think this is important. So yes, I'm going to keep it, but I'm also still leaning on, I think, the value of the stories being put out per iteration is more important than the quantity being put out.
Understood. Okay.
And then the decrease in backlog item count is, I would say, kind of similar to stories completed per iteration. Technically, you could keep that one. I'm going to go with A, though. I think it's more or less about the value.
All right, cool. They said, like, if we went through and, like you said, broke the stories down. So, like, there's probably going to be more of them now because we're taking one and breaking it into 4 chunks or whatever, the ones at the top. And we're doing that at a more reasonable pace. Okay, cool. Let's go. Colleen, what are you thinking?
I'm liking C because the more stories completed per iteration, that's a metric that would show me that the that would slow down or would take care of that trend of increasingly prolonged test work. So it's like they're doing so much test work that they aren't completing the stories.
True.
Is what I'm reading. And after they've gone through backlog refinement, the stories they've refined those, and I think that would lead to more stories completed per iteration, which would be how we would know that the problem was effectively addressed.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate it. Let's go. Now look, what you said C, what was your logic for C, sir?
Yeah, exactly what Colleen said, that when you go per iteration, like it's answering all the works that not been done, and it's so A, I know Jennifer said A, increase the value per story, but increase per value per story, that's also a good answer, but I don't think that is breaking all the backlog. So I think that C is the best answer because it's cutting down into iterations.
All right, awesome, dude. Mary, you said your project's going through the same situation right now. Tell us about it, please.
I mean, at the moment, we've been experiencing like slow releases, and the developers just take a long time to show us the work that they have done at the end of every spring. So the last 2 weeks, what we've been doing, we've been going through the backlog and just refine it to the product owner, like seriously refining it. And what we decided to do was encourage the developers to undercommit to their stories, not overcommit themselves. Just take like the least amount of work they can work on, and just let's see like the amount of stories they can cover in a duration of 2 weeks, so we can have like a cadence just like is consistent.
Yeah, getting it done. I love it. All right, cool. So this happens all the time. Your world, my world, everybody's world, whether you know it or not. It's like we start bringing in big chunks of work, and maybe it's not well understood or well defined or well broken down, or maybe we bring in too much. And if we think about like any kind of system or any kind of machinery or any kind of anything, like if we're bringing in a big chunk of things and we're trying to like implement it, there's a lot of coordination, there's a lot of testing, there's a lot of integration, there's all these different things if we bring it in. But if we do like what they call continuous integration, which is to have like, okay, we have a system that's running, we add one thing to it, either it works or it doesn't, and we know that the only thing we added was that thing, so it's like, okay, there must be a problem in the interactions. Cool, we can break that down, test it, and do it. But if we bring in like 5 different things at once, it's like, oh my God, there's a ghost in the system now. We don't know exactly what caused. Is it the interaction between the 5? Is it the one thing? Is it this and this? And like, Jesus, like we got to chase this around. So one thing that we could do is we could say, hey, take this backlog and let's really try to understand our work. So like one of the things that Jennifer mentioned is like breaking it down. So this little thing might actually become like 5 little chunks of work or whatever. And if we think about traditionally like a backlog, the way we want to see it is the stories at the bottom are ginormous. They're like ideas, vision, like big things. Then as the stories work themselves up this backlog, the way to think about it is a triangle. And then they get smaller because we broke them down more granular. Now, the same work is there as a totality, but the size of the cards gets smaller and smaller in the sense of like what's on there. So at the top, they're like really small. They're like champagne bubbles, meaning like small tactical work that we can accomplish and we understand them. So if we keep them at this level, we can bring in big chunks and there's a lot of coordination kind of problems. Now, if this backlog is worth, I don't know, $10,000 to the customer, whatever, all the things, if we deliver it, it's worth 10,000, 10 million, who cares? It's still going to be worth 10 million, 10,000, whatever here. It's just the form of it is broken down more. So first of all, the backlog count, like the number of stories, is going to go up, not down, because we broke down these little bubbles. Cool. So there's more bubbles in there. To increase the value per story, the value per story would probably end up going down because, like, if it's worth 10K and there's only like 10 of these in there, each one's worth $1,000 roughly. But if we started breaking these down like champagne bubbles, each bubble in the glass is still worth 10K, all the stuff inside of it, but all the bubbles are like less. So the average value per story is actually lower. Okay. So that doesn't work. But then the story's completed. Now we're just pumping out champagne bubbles. Bloop, 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 bloop. We're cranking these things out one by one instead of big chunks of work. So our stories per iteration, if we got backlog refining to work well, then we would crank stories out like Mary's talking about, like just start little things, don't overcommit, crank a thing out and move it, move it, move it, move it. That's all Agile's trying to do, if that makes sense. So, answer C. That makes sense? Anybody super duper confused? It's okay, I got time. All right, cool. That is it for tonight. We went deep into like a lot of Agile's concepts and stuff. You're doing great. Keep moving through the concepts and let me know if you have any problems.